This presentation is broken into two parts, and it's very specialized. It has specifically to do with understanding children who are experiencing reading difficulties and how to help them in a relatively short amount of time to become accurate in their reading and fluent. That's the first half. The second half, it might be probably more the third, is we're going to learn in a deceptively simple way, in a very short period, how to help children learn Gemara where they are otherwise, I don't want to use the word suffering, but really challenged, really having a hard time. So there's a partial hashkafa part to this presentation. If I could ask them to close the doors at the back, sorry. So go to screen, please. Yeah, I'm going to. There's part of this presentation is hashkafa, which will really help us understand why we have what you would call a plague, a magefa of reading disabilities. And we will be looking at how Kazal look at the demarcation lines where a child is meant to acquire language and what are the points in their reading career. And then when we match that up against the system that unfortunately we basically are stuck with, I think it will become much more apparent why so many children are having difficulty with reading. This presentation is actually one that I give for teacher training. That's what I do most of the time. I do not do public speaking most of my time. I work for Mishkan Yecheskel under the auspices of Rabbi Moshe Wolfson Shlita. And I mostly work with Hasidic Meisters, believe it or not. I'm not going to get involved into why it's that way. It just happens to be the Hasidic Meisters are very receptive, very open-minded. I know it sounds maybe as a surprise to some of you, but rebellion is actually in their veins, it's in their blood. The Baal Shem Tov was, he did something very different to reclaim a lot of things that were missing in Klal Yisrael at the time. And the concept of a Rebbe and a Chassid is so ingrained in their blood that it's much easier for them to listen to something that is sounds very radical, because what you're going to hear sounds very radical, but I'm going to let you be the ones to pass verdict if it makes total sense to you, and as best as we understand in a Torah context that it really does make a lot of sense. So I work with about 43 meisters, 3 of Satmar, Vishnitz, 2 Bobov, 45th and 48th Street, Bells, mostly in Brooklyn, a little bit in Williamsburg, and also in Monsey, Nicholsburg. I have my training as well. The training that I offer is Al Pi Darkei. That means how to literally reach individual children in a classroom. This is something I've developed over 30 years. I've been working with children for 30 years, but it's really in the last 12, 15 years that I've developed literally hundreds and hundreds of physical materials to reflect many different abilities, learning styles, and what's called different intelligences, so that a child in the classroom that has their own mind, which is what Al Pi Darkei really means, can learn this information in their way if presented in lots of different ways. So that's basically a very brief background. So I'm going to jump into reading. We have a serious problem, a very big challenge, and that our system, whether we like it or not, for the past 2,000 years is completely text-based. And the yeshiva system, which is only over 100 years or so, is totally text-based, and certainly since the advent of printing, some 600 years ago, if a child is not successful in reading accurately and reading fluently, there's 2 different parts. Fluency isn't necessarily fast, but if he can't read accurately and fluently, on a 0 to 10 scale, 0 is the least value, 10 is the most value. How do you think that will affect their ability to be successful in a system that is basically totally text-based? What would you say? Low self-esteem. What's the chances of being successful, 0 to 10? 2. Maybe a 2. That's I think that's probably quite on the generous side, but I agree it's probably somewhere between -5 and 2. The highest number I've ever heard is really a 3. If a child cannot read accurately in first grade, suddenly into second grade, and into the further years, if it gets missed and they're not reading accurately, can you see why they may be able to compensate with memorization of information? They may be able to compensate if they've got very good abstract thinking to be able to argue outside the text. This Rabbi Yehuda has a svara, a certain understanding of, and Rabbi Yossi disagrees because, and that they can understand up here, but to reconstruct it in the text, if they can't read accurately, they're going to have not just a hard time, it's close to impossible. And that's the good news. The good news will be a kid who's not reading accurately or fluently, but is able to compensate through his abstract thinking. When I was working in Monsey, where I live, in my basement, I have a model classroom with all my materials. I have also in Brooklyn. And it would be almost every day I would have Bochrim as old as third year best medrash coming privately to learn how to read accurately and fluently. And these are success stories in the sense that they were able to fake the system, but have realized, you know what, I'm davening an hour plus a day. Shachris Mincha Mariv, but what am I actually doing? I don't really, we're not going into davening now, but without me even knowing what I'm saying, but if I can't read accurately or fluently, what am I doing? I'm practicing reading inaccurately and without fluency. I'm swallowing entire syllables, parts of words, or entire words in order to keep up with the tzibur. And so actually they're spending over an hour a day practicing not reading accurately. You hear the problem? But they're coming to me for a very simple reason. They're not Yedei Sefer in the sense that they can't reconstruct Pshat from a Gemara or Rashi or Tosfos and Rishonim inside the text, but they're so brilliant they can argue it outside, and they are amongst the better boys in the group or in their shir who can actually argue the cases, but not inside. Now that's a success story in the sense that many children, if they're not reading accurately in their earlier years, and they can't follow fast enough inside the text, and the Rebbe is going ahead in the Chumash, and then they're learning Mishnayos. Eventually they get to Gemara, which is a whole new part which we're going to look at in the second half of this presentation. What will happen to the child's mind when he says, I want to be frum? But the almost only measure of success in the boys' yeshiva system is a good learner. If I can't read, where do I fit in the system? If they cannot compensate with memorization, remembering very well information, remembering a chant or the tune in order to be able to say it close to Baal Peh but not be able to read it properly inside, if they can't compensate with abstract thinking, then this child becomes a serious candidate for unaffiliating himself and disassociating himself and saying, I don't belong here. I cannot identify myself in a system that is text-based and gives so much recognition, admiration, and almost approval to those who can learn and learn well. So reading accuracy and fluency is a very serious concern. And what I want to share with you as the background, I'm going to share with you six steps to remediation of reading accuracy and fluency that takes, and this is going to sound bizarre to you, this takes minutes. No, it doesn't take weeks and months and years. It takes minutes for the child to see that they can read. This is what I'm referring to specifically is Lashon HaKodesh, but a number of teachers have told me they've applied the same principles to English with measurable success. Measurable means the child will experience the before and after. They will experience within probably 20 minutes making mistakes in their reading and going gradually to the sixth step where they're reading accurately, fluently, and even fast without any mistakes. This is not going to be a permanent fix. I'm going to share with you these 6 steps in a few minutes where you will see why it works. I've given this presentation in Tomer Sora. There are about 300 people in the audience at the time. And unbeknownst to me, the head of the convention came to me afterwards. He said, you know, you did not know, but there was one Rosh Yeshiva there who has 600 Talmidim. And he came in order to be Mevasa you Berabim. But he had a cheshbon. Why? Because I was offering that you can help a child remediate their reading accuracy or inaccuracy in a very short period of time, and after that, just a lot of practice of about 10 minutes a night, a few nights a week. And the child will become an accurate and fluent reader. Unless they've got a very serious neurological problem, the vast majority of children, even with mild dyslexia, will succeed. I don't know where the lights were, but we'll continue. I'm not sure how it's coming out on tape. But so this Rosh Yeshiva believed that I was fooling the Rabbim into believing that there's no such thing as a serious intrinsic reading disability, and therefore he felt he would be defending the audience, who are mostly mechanchim and teachers, against what I was proposing. He thought I'm just a kiruv rabbi. What's my shaykhus to chinuch? And that's been said a few times. I'm not going to say where it came from, but it's been said a few times, when in reality most of my work for 30 years has been private tutoring, working with children, consulting with parents and teachers and schools. And I've started a number of schools in Brooklyn where I have actually a track. Some of you heard of, any of you heard of Borough Park Beis Yaakov? Okay, so there's a Beis Yaakov in Borough Park, which probably is the largest in the country. I don't know what happened to the...
Can you live with these lights because he's got a projector? If this is...
Oh, I see. My problem is...
They're connected for some
right. So my problem is that is it coming out on the...
I think they're beautiful here. Yeah, it looks great. Let me go look at it.
Thank you. Awesome.
This is working fine, Rabbi.
Okay. It's just what it's looking at. Okay, fine. Okay, good. So this Rosh Yeshiva, after he heard the first few minutes of me explaining the history of how reading disabilities has become a magefa, a veritable plague in our community, and what I was sharing was basically Kazal based, he decided that he's going to test my theory on his worst reader out of 600 kids. And when he did, he was shocked that by step 3, remember I told him we're going to cover 6 steps. By step 3, the child was correcting himself. So he called back Rabbi Ryback, who was the head of the convention, and said to him, I have the only description I have for what this is magic. I'm here to share with you a system that's not magic. It's not magic. It just follows the child. Now let me give you quickly the background about reading. We have a veritable magefa for a very simple reason. Reading has become very complicated. If we take what are the least components in the skeletal form of what reading really is, if we could break it down to the simplest possible components, it's really 2 items. Reading is recognition of shapes and the sounds those shapes represent. So for example, in the case of a bass, gimel, dalet, when the child is able to fully recognize that specific shape, in Hebrew it means an ois. Ois is a sign. It's a sign to the brain of the child of what formation to make between their tongue, their lips, their mouth, and when they breathe out, how to shape out the sound associated to that letter. So if you want to say that bass has a b sound, gimel g, or if you want to say, no, it only takes on the sound that the nakuda gives it, it's still the same 2 components. Shape of letters, shape of nakudas, and the sound that comes out because of it. Is this clear? So really, what language acquisition is, in its simplest form, is the child's mastery of recognizing the subtle differences between all the different shapes of the letters of the aleph base and the different nakudas, the sounds that come because of the nakudas. Is this clear? What needs to happen is for a child to go al pi darkai. What does darkai mean? His way. Now, unfortunately, we're stuck with that translation. We don't go that much further. But let me give you an example. If the child is not ready for reading, and we're going to explain what that means, and I introduce a child to Isis before they're ready, Nakudas before they're ready, blending the Nakuda with the ice before they're ready. Is that called Al-Pi Darkai? No, absolutely not. So Al-Pi Darkai also means when the child's ready, number 1. Number 2, even if the child is ready, if I go too fast, wrong pace, is that called Al-Pi Darkai? Of course not. If I go too slow, I'm doing 1 ice a week over 26 weeks, 22 weeks, and this child is understimulated. Is that a possibility? If I go too slow, is that called Al-Pi Darkai? No, that's also not going at his pace. So number 1, is he ready? Number 2, am I going at the pace of the child? Number 3, am I teaching the information in a way that's endearing to the child, that they enjoy it? Because if it's not, that's not Al-Pi Darkai. Number 4, am I hitting the child in his strength, his learning intelligence, his learning style? I don't have time now. We're going to talk about it actually in one of the other lectures about what is my spiritual IQ. Now, thanks to people like Dr. Gardner, who's popularized multiple intelligences, we can more fully understand when Shlomo HaMelech, Beruach HaKodesh, told us the way to be mechanech a child is al pi darko, according to his way. Darko, we now know, is not just academic intelligence. There's many other intelligence. There's musical intelligence, there's spatial intelligence, there's language intelligence, there's mathematical intelligence, there's kinesthetic body intelligence, there's emotional intelligence. If we can hit a child on multiple intelligences in the way they are taught, which is what I do in Brooklyn with my teacher training, then you're going to have a child who will get the information in his strength. Is this making sense? So Al Pi Darko has much more than just the simple taich. Here's part of our problem. If a child is being forced to read before they're really ready, or going at a pace that's not their pace, and they haven't finished in their minds fully mastering the specific shape of each letter and the sound that letter and nakuda makes, then what's going to happen is that the child will start thinking what? If they're feeling pressure and they're not getting it, what's going through the mind of a child? Probably not on a conscious level.
Why should I try?
Why should I?
Why should I try if I can't?
Okay, I can't guess. It's very hard. I don't want to try because each time I try and I don't get it, it makes me feel what? Rotten. Embarrassed. Insecure. Unintelligent. Stupid. Not as smart as. Now what happens if I as a parent or teacher keep pushing? What's going to happen? I'm reinforcing what? The failure. I'm reinforcing the message. I'm going to share with you, we're going to get to it very soon, these 6 steps. There was only one major cardinal rule, and that is never correct the child. Never correct the child. Why? When I correct a child in their reading, what's the message I send the child?
You don't know what I do.
You don't know, sorry?
You don't know it. And
You don't know it, I do. What else am I saying to the child?
Keep making mistakes.
You keep making the same mistakes or other mistakes. You're not reading accurately. What else am I saying to the child?
You can't do it on your own.
You can't do this on your own. What's the real goal of teaching? For the kid to become independent in his reading. Oh, so every time I correct the child, what am I telling the brain of the child to do next time he comes to either this word or a different word that he's not sure of? But he knows I'm going to kick in and correct him. What am I telling the brain of the child to do? Work harder or work less? Oh, work less. So here I am trying to be mechanech the kid, but in reality what I'm doing is slowing down the brain.
If you don't correct the child, how's the child going to know?
Excellent question. You're going to see in a few minutes. The basic premise here is trust the intelligence of the child. There are 3 parts of the learning process. Part 1 is the gift of the Torah, Matan Torah. That means the information the child cannot come to on their own, I have an obligation as a teacher to give that child. That's called Matan Torah. The second part of the learning process is Chazara. That's the most important piece. Labriut. Chazara doesn't mean only how many times. Kazal give us different numbers, 30, 40, some say 101. It also means in lots of different ways. The third part of the learning process is the king and the mastery. I'm responsible for the matana. The child is responsible for the chazara. I'm responsible to facilitate the chazara in lots of different ways. I have to give the gift that this is an aleph, this is a base, this is a gimel, this is a dalet. This 3 dots here makes an S sound. Can you say eh? Very good. Let's put it underneath the base. B, eh, be, very good, etc. But the child, once he's got the gift, I do not need to correct the child. You know why? Because there are ways to help the child self-correct. Every time I correct a child, I'm reinforcing stupid, unintelligent, not smart. I can't. I'm not as good as. I don't have to think this through because my Rebbe, Mora, private tutor, father, mother is going to correct me. So all in the name of being mechanech the kid, I'm actually helping him remain dependent. Is this making sense? You follow the logic here? The reason why we have such problems, and some are saying it's as much as 30 to 40% of the children entering 1st grade not reading accurately. And some of them are not caught until 2nd, 3rd and 4th and even later. One of the simple reasons, and my personal experience, and I do not have a statistic for this, my personal experience, I would say, is that 98, this is my, I don't think I have a number that's real, but in my experience, I would say 98% out of 100 kids have no reading intrinsic disability. The only problem is, we don't follow Kazal. Kazal tell us very clearly, Ben Shalosh Shanim La'oisius. A child is introduced to the letters at 3 years old. The next demarcation line is Ben Chamesh Shanim L'Mikra. 5 years old for reading. That's the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, almost last Mishnah in Perek Hay. But the small print in Hilchos Melamdei Tanakos opens up worlds to us. Ben Chamesh Shanim Shalemim. The child doesn't have to be reading accurately till how old?
6.
5 full years, 6 years old. Now watch this. Rambam, Bet Yosef, and it's Paskin Shulchan Aruch, Im Chalush B'dato. If the child is weak in his mind, and be very clear, I do not believe weak means unintelligent or slow or stupid. Weak means weak. Im Chalush B'dato, Oy Ben Sheva or Ben Shmoina. The child's reading accuracy goes all the way till 8 years old. You've got through 6 to 8, 5 till 8 years old. A period of 3 years, a range of 3 years to emerge into language acquisition. We don't have a system that follows that to give the luxury of time that if a kid enters first grade, within 2 months, if he's not reading accurately fluently, I'll get a call. Mr. Rietti, your son Moshe is a sweet boy. He's so able. He's not a discipline problem at all. Listen, he's not reading very accurately, but and the class was starting to pick up pace. You know what, I think if you just do a little bit of practice at home, it'll be fine. A few minutes a night. So let's say I'm a good father and I practice my kid. Just be honest with me. Is it very likely that I'll fall into the trap of correcting my kid when they misread a word? Yes or no? Yes. Absolutely. And with that, we reinforce, it's actually 15 disempowering messages into the mind of the child. I'm stupid, I can't. I'm unintelligent, I can't figure this out myself. I'm not as smart as. I don't like reading, it makes me feel rotten or humiliated. It makes me feel I can't. And it ends up like this. A child is desperate to read. They can't articulate the desperation. They're craving to read. They know what's coming. If they've got older brothers, sisters, they know the whole world is going to open up to them. They can't say this. They don't have the emotional vocabulary to explain, my future hangs a lot on my ability to read accurately and fluently. But they know in a text-based, I've got to be able to do this. So on a 0 to 10 scale, they're desperate. They really want to read. Now watch this. I call it 1 foot on the gas. I desperately want to read. 1 foot on the brakes. I don't enjoy reading. I'm finding it hard. Now I correct my kid, and now what happens is I'm getting exasperated. Moshe, look, one more time. It's not Vayoy Mar, it's Vayoy Mer. Look. There's a seichel under the mem. Vayoy Mer. Say it one more time. Okay. Now, I'm trying to control my anger, but you can see, what am I saying to my kid? Am I going al pi darkoi to his pace when he's ready, or am I going to my expectations? And if it's according to my expectations, listen, your twin brother or your other siblings at your age were reading much better than this. Or if they get any pressure in the classroom without even hearing the words, the rest of the class is moving ahead and I can't follow fast enough. I can't put the blending of Oishis and the Kudzas together fast enough. His mind is saying the same message again and again and again. I'm not enjoying this. This is hard. I'm fine. So what's the solution? Okay, resource room. So I'm not trying to be facetious over here. I'm just saying, tell me if you think I'm slightly exaggerating, but resource room, now the kid is taken out. Now I've heard from many children they actually enjoy going out because they get incentives. Then when I've dealt with boys and girls between 27 and 33 who went off the derech and came back. There's about 100 and we've been doing a very interesting book together, and hopefully they'll come out with it finally. 17 items that help push them off the derech, not with any intent, but it's part of our system. One of them is the reading problem. And in the reading problem, they can only articulate this when they're much older and explain what they were going through. Even the kids who went to resource gladly did realize after a while, I'm different. Something is wrong with me. Why am I being called out? Okay, there's 2 or 3 others as well, so I'm not the only one who's being embarrassed by. But if that doesn't work, private tutoring. And if that doesn't work, we'll get a reading specialist. If that doesn't work, guess what's going to happen next? A few months into first grade, just tell me if you think I'm exaggerating, I've done this with dozens and dozens of Manalas, and unfortunately they all nod their heads, yes, this is what happens to the kids. 6 months, let's say, into first grade, I get a phone call from the Rabbi. Look, Mr. Reed, I'm not an expert, but I can tell you this, your child is not paying attention. His mind is all over the place. Somehow he's just completely lost focus. So I'm not sure the reading problem or not, but I have a feeling he may have ADD or ADHD or some sort of LD. I don't know, in my days it was just LSD, but now they've got all these new, I never tried it myself, but here now you've got, so what's going to happen next is he's taken for a full battery of tests, and what do you think is going through the mind of a child, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old? If dad can't fix me, and the teacher's giving up, resource room's not working so well, private tutors have not really fixed my reading problem, and I'm going to reading specialist and a full gamut of tests, what's going through the mind of a child? Something is really wrong with me. Oh my gosh, I'm a child, you're adults, you can't fix me, you and you can't fix me. Do you hear what the problem? So what ends up happening, my foot's on the gas, I want to read, I desperately need to read. Other foot, I find this painful. This makes me feel stupid, humiliated. I get angry with myself. Why can't I read? How come others can't? This is so hard. And then I resist until my foot is deep down on the brakes. If I've got 1 foot on the gas, 1 foot on the brakes, how far will this car go? In this metaphor, how far will it go? Nowhere. What will happen to the engine real fast? It'll burn up. So is it any wonder, if I'm going fast and the kid is really ready, that a child is hating reading? So I'm trying to help understand, I'm trying to take the mystery out of why so many children are finding reading so difficult, when in reality, we just need to turn it around and give them all the power. And I'll show you how. Kazal tell us, if we were to follow Kazal, please forgive me for even saying it this way, you've got 3 years old to 7 or 8 years old to get all the oisius and reading accuracy. We don't have the luxury of time. We follow a different system. I'm not going to the origin of it, but we follow a system that has nothing to do with pedagogy. Has nothing to do with chinuch. It's purely economically based. If your body has been on planet Earth for 6 years on September the 1st, you are in this kita, this grade. If your body has been on planet Earth for 7 years on September 1st, you're in this grade. It has no reflection on ability. And what's really bizarre, unfortunately, I'm not putting that down, I'm just sharing with an observation. In every single grade, you have at least 3 years of academic ability and emotional maturity. In every single grade. We don't do mixed grades, we don't do mixed years, ages in the same grade. Everyone's within 1 year, basically, of each other, basically. But the problem is that when I'm teaching a class of 20 plus kids, in some cases up to 25 or 30, the reality is that at the bottom of the class, the kids are struggling, could easily repeat the previous year. The ones at the top are understimulated, could easily go to the next grade. And I'm shooting somewhere for the middle, but there's so many individuals in that class that if I take Alpidarkoi seriously, then how many kids do I have in a classroom of 25? How many different minds are there in this classroom? I've got 25 different minds. So I have an obligation to try and reach as many of them as possible. And unfortunately, we're stuck with a language, which is English translation of our Hebrew, that kills our ability to understand what my function is as a teacher. What does Rabbi translate as? Teacher. What does Melamed translate as? Teacher. What does a Mora translate as? Teacher. What does a Mechanech translate as? A teacher. Does anyone have a question over here? Where do you think the problem lies? In Lashon HaKodesh for choosing different terms, or the Christian translation, which is stuck with one term for all of them? Let's just be honest with ourselves. The translation has a problem. What does Rebbe mean? The Christian translation is rabbi and teacher. Neither of them are accurate. What's the 2-letter root of Rebbe? Rav. What does Rav mean? Many, a lot of, abundance. What does a Rebbe have to have many or a lot of? Patience. A lot of patience.
Students.
Has maybe a lot of students. Okay. What else do you have to have a lot of? Methods for reaching different minds. A lot of patience, a lot of love. He has to have a lot of information, hopefully. But most importantly, lots of different ways of reaching different minds. Does this make sense? And we're stuck with a translation that is frozen teacher as, I'm here to teach, you're here to learn. I'm here to speak, you're here to listen. I'm here because I got the answers, you're here because you don't. I'm here, and it's all a one-way street. And yet, when we see what the Torah is talking about, it's always dialogue, it's always interaction. Trust, and that's the key word here, trust the mind of the child. So now, with this background, let me share with you how we can help a child in 6 very fast steps, and then we're going to do the Gemara. You'll be surprised how fast this goes. It goes much faster than you can imagine, and it's deceptively simple. Number 1, when I've got a child who's not reading accurately or fluently, I will ask him, the first question I'll actually ask him is, are you here because you want to be here? Or are you here because your Rabbi or Mara or your parents are forcing you? Inevitably, it's because he's being forced to be here, because he's already been to reading specialists, and before then private tutors, even resource room. So his foot is really deep down on the brakes. My goal is to disarm him and make him feel that this is different, and that if he does not experience a measurable difference between now and 20 minutes from now, it's going to take us a little bit less than that to do it, but the exercises I will do in these 6 steps takes about 20 minutes, somewhere between 10 and 20 minutes, then the kid never has to see me ever again. And I'll tell him that. My guarantee to you is this following. If you don't enjoy what you're doing, and you don't see a serious difference between before and after, then I will advocate for you. I will defend you in not having to ever see me ever again. So what am I doing to start with? What's my first point over here?
Enabling him.
I'm enabling him. Who am I giving all the power to? I'm giving him all the power. I'm putting him in total control, because if he doesn't enjoy this and doesn't see the difference, I'm going to tell him, you do not have to come back. Because what's he petrified of? What's he in fear of when he's going to a new reading program? He's going to fail again. And if he fails again and is tried and failed, why should I keep trying just to experience the pain? So that piece I've got to help right up front. Then I'll ask him, Moshe, can you open up a pasuk any way you want, and choose a pasuk, and read me this pasuk 3 to 4 times. I have a handout which I'll give out at the end. I don't like giving it during, because then it becomes a distraction. So any of you want a handout of what I'm sharing with you, it's a full printed out handout. If you want an email version, I'll be happy to give you that. Moshe, can you read me this pasuk, same pasuk, 3 or 4 times? Now here's, again, the cardinal rules, never correct. I don't want to even give away in my body language or my tone of voice any judgment. No disappointment, not even approval. You can, if you want, you can approval, but I don't even want approval. Because I don't want the kid thinking that the reason why he's good is because of what I say. I want him to believe, based on knowledge, experience, that he's good because he knows he is. Not because of an outside reference. If we want him internally knowing that he's either a good reader or where he's making mistakes and can self-correct. Is this clear? So number 1 of this, 3 times or 4 times. Why do I want the kid to read the same verse 3 or 4 times? What's my goal here? Confidence.
He can correct himself.
So I want to see to what extent does he correct himself. Does he notice his own mistakes on the 2nd or 3rd reading? Does he make the same mistake each time? Does he make new mistakes? Is there a pattern in the type of mistakes? Oh, he keeps misreading a hirik as a segel or a pasach as a kametz. I want him to give me a profile, so to speak, of his reading territory. What's his reading like? Number 2 of this, and again, each time, one more time, Moshe, until I've done it 3 or 4 times. And nothing in my voice that suggests disappointment or you could have done much better, none of that. Number 2, yeah.
You don't tell him at the outset to read it 3 or 4 times.
Sorry?
You don't tell him at the outset to read it?
Yes, I'll ask him to read, let's say after the first time he finished, I think, and another time please. Yeah. And I always put it in question form that he feels that he can say no. I'll be respectful of his mind because I want him to sense that he's in control over here. Because usually, I'm not saying all the time, but usually they experience disempowerment when they're told what to do and how to correct themselves. How to correct the word. Number 2 of this, I will ask him, Moshe, could you read me this word one more time? Now, which word am I choosing?
A word can be.
A word that what?
Is that accurate?
That, or it could be, but I don't need to correct him on that because he got it right. I'm going to choose a word that he did not read correctly. He made a mistake on. Why don't I say, Moshe, you didn't read this one correctly. Could you read it one more time?
Put him down.
I'm putting him down. I don't need to. I don't need to. See, what's the difference between asking him, Moshe, could you read me this word one more time? Or telling him, this one you didn't read correctly. Could you read it one more time? What's the difference?
feel good about
What
it.
do you do then?
It's really worlds apart. If I give the child a chance to self-correct, what's my level of trust? 0 is I've got the least, 10 is the most. What's my level of trust that they can figure this out themselves? If I'm giving the child a chance, Moshe, could you read this one more time for me, please? What am I saying to him? You can do this yourself. Now, if he honestly doesn't know, and he'll make the mistake again, that's good news. There's no bad news here. Only good news. Because even if he makes a mistake over here, and he reads it leman, and really there's a pasach under the ayin, it should be lema'an. Right? So, or vayomer, he read vayoymar. That's good news. It's not bad news. You know why? Because he's showing me what his problem is, so that I can help him. Watch this. At number 2, I'll go through 2, 3, or 4, however many mistakes he made over here, and I will get him to read that word again. I'm here to tell you, at least 6 times out of 10, he'll self-correct at level 2. He will self-correct at level 2. At least 6 out of 10. At least. Why? What happened between level 1, where he was making a mistake, all 3 or 4 readings with that same word, and now when I ask him, could you read this word one more time? Why is it different that he will more likely self-correct?
Being careful about it.
Oh, he's being careful. Oh, so what is reading? We said there are 2 components to reading, shapes and sounds. So what is reading? Paying attention to the shapes and sounds. Not just slowing down, it's paying attention. I'm helping the child rewire his mind to pay attention to the way he's reading. When he's self-corrected over here, I will be able to go to number 3. Let's say he makes the same mistake. It's still leman, and it's not lema'an. It's still vayoy mar instead of vayoy mer. So I'll go to level 3. Level 3, I'll give him a menu. I'll say, Moshe, is it lema'an or is it leman? Is it vayoy mer or is it vayoy mar? Which one is it? Guess what he'll do 9 times out of 10? Literally 9 times out of 10. Guess what he'll do? He'll self-correct. Now, if he's a super street smart Moshe, I mean, I'm here to tell you, even the street smart Moshes are mostly so tamimus that when they read this, they're not thinking a whole process of elimination. But for those kids that are that street smart and figure out, 1 second, if I made mistakes up here, and you ask me to repeat the word over here, and then you give me a menu, obviously it's the other reading that, and so he'll choose. If I suspect that, then, and most times you won't need to, but then I will go to, or is it vayoymir? Or is it lema'on? Which one is it? Right? You give him a choice of 3. 10 times out of 10, vast majority of the time, not every time, but 9 to 10 times out of 10, he'll self-correct over here. That's what I was telling you, that Rosh Yeshiva said that out of 600 boys, he selected the worst reader in the school, and he was self-correcting at number 3. Level 3, they will self-correct the majority of times. If he doesn't, great news. If he reads Vayoy Mar, even after the menu, and it's really Vayoy Mer, what has he taught me?
And he really just doesn't know the difference in the...
He's taught me what he doesn't know in a very precise way. He's taught me he's misreading the segol. He's misreading the specific nakuda that I now need to re-gift. Remember, there's 3 parts of the learning process. The gift, Matan Torah, Chazara, in lots of different ways, and many times, and then finally he's got the Kenyan. Right? So I will re-gift the segol. Moshe, what sound does this make? This makes an eh. Can you say eh? It's eh. It's like 3 eggs. Can you see eh? I'll make it the shape of an egg. Right? We'll try and make it the shape of an egg. And if you're allowed to, I'll do this on his hand or on his chest or on his back. I'll put three dots. We'll take the eh and I'll put it under a base, a lamed, a gimel, a dalet. Oh, der, gimel, ger, base, ber. And then finally I'll put it under a mem. What will he read? Meh. Very good. Then I'll go back to the original word. Guess what he'll do? 10 times out of 10. Vayomer. See, what I'm doing over here, this takes a little bit longer for me to explain to you than it does to actually go through this with the child. This takes a couple minutes to get to this point. Do you follow? What you're doing is helping the child take their foot off the brakes and start realizing, I can read. That's the message we want to give the child. Yes, you can. And not only can you read, you can self-correct. Once you've done this, these 3 steps, you might not have to do number 3 with every single word, because you may self-correct with a number of mistakes over here. But any ones that he doesn't self-correct, the menu will take care of that. And if it doesn't, re-gift the nakuda, re-gift the ice. I don't have all my materials here, but I literally, I would not be exaggerating if I told you I have hundreds of physical materials to help a child, ages 3 to whatever age that they're having difficulty with reading, to learn how to read. I have materials here, just a little bit, where you can get children in preschool reading before they're reading. And the reason why, I'm not going to go this into detail now, but I have a photograph of all the major shirashim that a child needs to know in the entire Chumash Bereishis, which takes care of about 86% of the entire Chumash Bereishis, which is 13,000 words out of 16,000. And it also takes care of, generically, these are the 65 to 80% of the rest of the vocabulary throughout the rest of Chumash. So you're giving an amazing advantage if you've got an actual picture. So I've had aides from Rabbi Engel in Toronto, and Lubavitch are using this method in a number of different schools where they've tried it in preschool when they teach pictures to the child and show a picture of water, and they say, this is water, mayim. So the children know from the picture, hey, I know that's water. Oh, Doug, yeah, I know that's a fish. Then when they start reading, guess what happens? Because they know this is mayim, when they start reading mayim, they start making connection with the picture. I'm not giving you all the training now, but using these materials, the children end up reading much faster, not faster than they have to, but they are able to. They are able to go at a much faster rate if you go with materials that reflect multiple intelligence. This is visual intelligence. So moving forward, number 4 of this is once they've corrected themselves, I will now ask them, Moshe, could you give me a score? I want you to read the same pasuk. One more time now. This time I want you to give yourself a score for accuracy. I will define accuracy. If you read every single word wrong, then you'll score yourself a 0. If you make no mistakes in the whole pasuk, you'll score yourself a 10. If you make a couple of mistakes, you'll decide what score to give yourself. Who am I setting him up against? Himself. Who is he competing against? Only his own potential. Now this is very interesting. I don't have the exact statistic, but I would say approximately 6 out of 10 times that the child will start reading the pasuk. When he makes his first mistake, guess what he'll do? Will he finish to the end of the verse as I requested and then give himself a score? Or will he say, oh, can I start again? Guess what he'll do? Most of the time, he'll say, oh, can I start again? And what will I say? Of course. You don't have to, I'm not going to tell him, listen, you cannot do teshuvah until Yom Kippur. Wait till Yom Kippur. No, you want to self-correct. Hey, that's great. You are raising the bar. Your expectation that you know you can do better than this, that's perfect. That's exactly what we want. You're holding yourself to a higher standard. Within a few moments, he'll give me a score, and I'll ask him, let's say he scores himself a 6 or a 7. So I'll say, Moshe, are you happy with your 6 or 7, or do you want to shoot for higher, 8, 9, or a 10? Guess what most Moshes will do? Yeah, they want to shoot for higher. If he says, no, I'm happy with my score, let him be. I'll leave it right there. No disappointment. I'll go straight to level 5. Most times they're going to want to do better. And when they see that I'm not putting any pressure on them to shoot higher, I'm fine with them accepting their 6 or a 7. I will go to the next score. What will build up is rapport and an acceptance in their mind that I am not being judged by my teacher, and they are letting me go when I'm ready. Because I want to go al pi darko. I do not want to go faster than is necessary. Is this making sense so far? Number 5 of this, I'm going to try to cut this very quick because there's another class starting right after mine. If he scores a 6 or 7 or an 8, I'll say, are you happy with that? Do you want to go for a 9 or 10? Most kids will want to go for the 9 or 10. Once they score the highest that they are happy with, I will then ask them to give themselves a score for fluency. Same way. But I'll be very specific in defining fluency. I'll say, now I want you to read the same pasuk. Please read the same pasuk. This time, I want you to give yourself a score 0 to 10 for fluency. The word fluency comes from the word flow. So I want each letter and its nakuda to flow into the next letter. So if I read it, vai, yai, mer, that was accurate, 10 out of 10. Was it fluent? No, it didn't flow. So what's going to call breaking the flow? What's called breaking the flow? Any pause, or coughing, or clearing the throat, or adjusting inside the seat, or looking around for a few moments. Why does the child do that?
Avoidance.
Yeah, what's he avoiding? What's he delaying?
Thinking.
It's time to think. If a kid has not been reading accurately or fluently to this point, what's their relationship to reading? It's very poor, it's not very happy. If you would have to give it a 0 to 10 scale of pleasure, it's probably closer to the 0. And in many cases, it's a minus. We want to get it all the way up. So one of the ways to help the child become conscious that they are sabotaging their own reading is to help them realize they're going to score against themselves for pausing, coughing, clearing their throat, moving around the chair, looking around. So that now that discomfort, which is only the body saying, I don't enjoy reading. Or if you want to be more accurate, I don't like reading. Or worse, I hate reading. And on a 0 to 10 scale, it might be I hate reading on a -1, -2, -3, and it keeps on going. And that's the worst part of the whole equation. It's not the apparent reading disability that's the worst news. The worst news is they hate reading. Because now they're sabotaging it. I know I can't. I'm stupid. I'm not smart. I'm unintelligent. I'm not as good as. I'll never be able to read. We want to get rid of that old voice, and that's what we're doing over here. We're rewiring and replacing it with knowledge. I know I can because I just did. So 0 to 10, give him for fluency, and if he scores himself a 5, 6, or 7, I say, are you happy with this, or do you want to shoot for higher? Yeah, clear? And eventually you get them to the highest score they can go at. Usually it'll be a 9 or a 10, in which case I'll then go to stage 6, which is speed reading. Speed reading is not a necessary skill the child has to have. But in the case where I've had a kid who's been through 1st, 2nd, 3rd grade, or just end of 1st grade, and is not used to reading accurately and fluently, and certainly not fast, I want him to have a whole new reference in his brain. So at number 6, there's no score here. I'll say, Moshe, this time read the same pasuk, but I want you to read it exactly as you read before, or faster, but not slower. Exactly as you did before, or faster, but not slower. It's amazing. I've seen this so many times. The child, with this new request, the brain will process the same information. Remember, reading is paying attention to shapes and sounds. Right? The subtleties in the shapes, and recognizing the different sounds that these nukudas, letters, make that they have to pronounce. So what ends up happening is you will often see a very big leap between over here where they score 10 for accuracy and fluency, and suddenly they can read the same pasuk. You can really see, and they will experience the difference. I read it much faster. I don't want to say a whole lot, but you will tell the difference many, many times. So what ends up happening over here is that the new voice says, I know I can read because I just did. If the child is up to it, and we say, you know what, should we go to pasuk base, and we go through the same 6 points. Is it going to be starting all over again with just a different pasuk, or is his mind already slightly different in the way he knows he can, and his expectations are slightly different as well? So what ends up happening is this whole process gets a little bit faster, and he'll get to number 4 and 5 sooner, and then what really has happened at number 6 is that when he hits pasuk base, and the old voice says, I can't read, I'm stupid. Oh no, I'm going to make myself humiliated, my foot's going back down on the brake. The new voice says, yeah, but if that's all true, if you're really so stupid and really can't, and really not as good as, then how come just now, in a matter of 10, 15 minutes, you went from 3, 4, 5 mistakes in the first reading, to self-correcting at number 2 and 3, and then getting yourself an 8, 9, or 10 for accuracy, and 8, 9, 10 or for fluency, and then you read the pasuk fast. If you're so bad a reader, then how come you just did? Do you follow the... So psychologically, so to speak, we're trying to help the child rewire, I know I can because I just did. And this does not have to take more than 20 minutes, the whole exercise. There's more to be said on this. I'm going to have to quickly move to Gumar. Is this clear? I'll be happy to take questions afterwards and show you some of the materials that I have that can help children to speed up, accelerate their learning process, because you've got materials that hit them in their learning intelligence. Gemara has become a serious problem, and unfortunately for really good reasons. See, if I were to ask you, you know what, a kid hasn't fully mastered Chumash, hasn't mastered Nach, hasn't mastered Mishnayos. The language of Chumash is not the same as Mishnah, and the language of Rashi, besides the font, is not the same as the fonts they are used to. And now I'm throwing them into Aramaic, which is a combination of biblical Hebrew and Aramaic, and it's quoting psukim, so you've got biblical Hebrew there. It's based on it's a commentary to the Mishnah, which is Mishnaic Hebrew. Now you've also got completely new vocabulary, new language, and you've also got no punctuation, no nakudas. So all the best clues to help you know how to read, and the punctuation, a pause, a comma, a period, a exclamation mark, a full stop, that's a period. A question stopped everything, but he started with Gittin. And he shows you that first page, yes, Menukud. Why? Make it easier for the kids. Is this making sense? So I'm going to share with you, I've only got 5 minutes, but believe it or not, I can do it in 5 minutes. I'm going to show you the 4 steps for helping a child, no matter what their starting line is, to become engaged in learning Gemara. Because there are 4 steps which unfortunately, not all the time, but very frequently, are missed out, that are the foundation for being able to start where the Gemara starts. The Gemara is a dialogue. The Gemara is a written dialogue of different opinions that are taking apart the information in the Mishnah. And before you can get into that dialogue and think the abstract thinking, I first got to get these 4 because they're ma'akev. These 4 will hold the child back from being able to make sense of the rest. And if he's going to not understand these 4, then the only way he can compensate is by memorization, but that's not learning. That's not dialogue, that's not interaction. That's not my mind being provoked to think and figure this out by myself. Is this making sense? So number 1 of this is, can the child read the words of the Gemara? Can he read the words? If he can't read them accurately, how is he supposed to reconstruct the pshat from the text? It's a massive disadvantage right there. So number 1 of this, get Tuv Yashas. And if he doesn't have the Masechta that you're teaching, I would not teach that Masechta unless it's a Masechta that you have in Tuv Yashas, because all of that is completely Menukud. You've got Nikud for all the Gemara text, and Rashi and Tosfos. And down the side of the margin, you've got Rashi Tevis. Wherever you've got Rashi Tevis, the abbreviated statements inside the Gemara, on the side of the margin, it will tell you in full what those Rashi Tevis are. That's a big aid to children. And anyone who says, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, but any Rosh Hashiva or Makichi who says it's not our Masorah is just saying that without realizing that the original printing of Shas Bavli required the printers to put in the Nikud. After the first mission in Gemara, actually first few lines of the Gemara on the first mission in Brachas, you will notice there is Nikud there. You'll see, there's a full stop, there's a period. 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 You'll see it, you can look at it in most editions. They only stopped after the first Mishnah when they realized, you know what, if we put in the Nikud, let alone the punctuation, this will take forever, you'll never finish your Shas Bavli. So they removed those part of the contract. Because typesetting in those days was so laborious. Number 2 of this, can the kid read the words? If you can't read the words, you're not going to be able to reconstruct the whole thing. Number 2 of this, can you punctuate the text? Put in the commas, put in the period, put in the question mark, put inverted commas, quotation marks, and do this for about 2 or 3 lines max for each part of the Gemara. Can you read these 2 lines? Can you punctuate it? Number 3, can you type? Number 2 and 3, you can switch the order, doesn't matter. Number 3, can you translate the individual words? Each individual word. You don't know the translation? Look at the dictionary. Give them an alkali. If you believe, let them use a jastro, use a jastro. If you still don't, let them use a chabrusa shas, or if necessary, you can use a Rabbi Art Scroll Shlita, which is good for reference. I don't recommend it for teaching how to learn, but it's excellent for reference. Let them write the translation on top of the word. These 3 things are absolutely essential, because if the kid doesn't have these 3, it's going to be very hard for him to do number 4. And number 4 is really the starting point of everything. Number 4 is, can you make sense out of these 3? Combine these 3 and come up with, what does this mean? What's Pashup Pshat? In Hebrew it's called Pashup Pshat. Pashup Pshat. What's the simple meaning? Do this with a class. Do it individually. Get them to come up with Pashup Pshat in these 2 lines. I call it breaking down into units of information. It's based actually on the Stipler, who many times told Bochum, who had difficulty learning Gemara, he said, chunk the Gemara down into about 10 sections. That means one amud of one page of Gemara should break down into about 10 sections. I call them units of information. This is a quote from Pasuk, that's one unit of information. Here's a question, that's a unit. An answer is a unit. A quote from a Bryce is a unit of information. Just deal with one unit of information at a time. This is called the slow but fast way. It's slow at the beginning, it starts picking up pace, and the children will recognize very quickly, oh my gosh, you're giving me the baseline skills upon which I will be able to become independent in my learning. Because after Pashup Pshat, here's where you get the minds of the children thinking like the Gemara. Very powerful. You got Pashup Pshat. Number 5 of this is, what questions do you have on Pashup Pshat? What questions do you have on the simple meaning that you just constructed? And here's where the Rebbe actually has to be really prepared. Because if he knows what the questions are that is going to come up in the Gemara, or that Rashi will be dealing with, or Tosfos, or any of the other Mefarshim, the Rebbe should have those questions already so that he can facilitate, direct the kids to see the problem in the Gemara. Because invariably, what's the Gemara all about? What's the Gemara? Just information? Constant dialogue, constant siksuk, conflict. How do you know? And why are you bringing this verse? Why don't you learn it from this verse? And why are you learning from this Bryce? We've got another Bryce that seems to have a parallel situation, but the mechanics are better matched. So why are you learning from this Bryce? And the Gemara is constantly arguing with itself. So you want the children to realize, if I teach the child the question and the answer, I've done a great disservice to the child. Why? Where's my trust in your intelligence if I'm giving you the question and the answer? The Gemara itself is assuming, hey, this is an unfolding of dialogue, so my first, in level 5 is, what's your question on Pshat? And what's the obvious predicate in that? There's a question. And if they come up with a question, great. If not, help facilitate it. Or ask them, do you see a problem with the way this line is written, and explain what you see the problem as, and then ask them, what's the question? Now, 5b is, what other questions do you have? And between the class, have them come up with 2 or 3 possible questions. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. Number 6 is, what's your answer to your questions? What are you doing with the mind of the child? What's your answer to your questions? What are you doing to the mind of the child?
Empowering them.
You're empowering them. How are you empowering them? When you're getting a child to come up with the questions and come up with their own answers, what's happening over here? Every time you ask a question, what's the predicate in the question? What's the assumption in the question?
You have the right to answer.
You can figure this out yourself. And even the weaker children who are afraid to think, or afraid to ask, or afraid to answer, they will soon start to get the message, oh, it's okay, not only okay for me to think and ask, but you're encouraging me to find the question. And you're giving me the baseline ability to do so, because you're helping me learn how to read the words, how to punctuate where's the beginning and the end of the sentence, where's a quote, and you're helping me to now realize, oh, there's a problem with this. Now this is where it gets the most exciting of all. Level 7 of this, after you say, what's your answer? What's your answer? Level 7 of this, when we go to learn the next 2 lines, or guess what will happen? Many times, you as the Rebbe will be able to tell the child, oh my gosh, question number 2 that you had is the question that Rashi has. Question number 3 you had is the question that Tosfos has. Or, your question is what the Gemara has in the next 2 lines. And this happens frequently. Now, what's happening in the child's mind? If in his question and his answer, he was machaven, he came to the question that Rashi deals with, or the Gemara deals with, or Tosfos, what's going on in the mind of the child?
It must be pretty valuable.
I must be pretty smart. How dumb can I be if I came up with a question that Rashi's asking or addressing, I came up with a question which the Gemara is about to ask, or I came up with the answer, and then when you learn inside the Rashi, or you learn inside the next 2 lines, you learn inside the Tosfos and show them where their question is, and they see their question, they see their answer, what happens to the mind of the child? See, this is the most important part of learning. It's not the information. It's not the technical mastery. That is important. No taking away from the value of that. But far greater, literally far greater than the technical ability to learn is their love for learning. Because it's love of learning which is going to want them to be learners all their lives. I'm not talking about kollel. I'm talking about they will always want to give a shir, go to a shir, have their own shiurim, because they love learning. We want to help the children see, hey, yeah, I can figure this out. And when the weaker kids are not coming up with it, but they see, hey, no one's being judged for any question they come up with or answers, and they're starting to notice that some kids are seeing the questions coming up in the Gemara, in Rashi, in Tosfos, what's going to happen to them? They want to be part of this. This can literally transform the kids in a very short period. I'm not talking about weeks and months. You're talking about within a couple of hours of learning this way, the kids get the picture. I see what you're doing for me. You're giving me the baseline skills of, can I read the words accurately? Can I punctuate the text? Am I translating each word individually? Don't give them long word lists. These long word lists don't really work long term, because the proof is that 5 years later they're still playing with the same word list. It's crazy. No, let them put the correct translation on top of the words in the Gemara. If you want them to have a separate Gemara later with none of their punctuation and none of their words, that they do later on a Chazara based on knowing how to read it from their real Gemara inside the class, that's fine. But it's essentially, give them all the needs they need. These will not be crutches. Because you're going to get to number 4, 5, and 6 very quickly. What's Pashup Pshat? What questions do you have on Pshat? What is your answer to it? And then you go to the next 2 lines, Rashi, Tosfos, or whatever commentaries you want to bring in, the kids will be able to follow much more easily. Is this making sense? Yeah? Any questions? I'm sorry I went slightly over time. Yes, ma'am.
In respect of the first methodology for just basic reading,
Yeah.
when the child's issue is anxiety
Yes.
and not processing,
Yes.
purely anxiety,
Yes.
will it work?
Yes, excellent. This depends, I would say, more on the personality of the teacher. The method will definitely help, because the method is based on trusting the child's intelligence. You can read this yourself. You can self-correct, because I'm asking you, could you read me this word one more time? But in the voice of the teacher, which is part of what I do in my teacher training, there's the emotional IQ component, which is listening, sensitivity, respect, trusting the child's intelligence. I've had situations where the child's so anxiety-ridden, and what I did over here was not their starting point. They weren't up to reading even the pasuk 3 or 4 times. I've had situations like that. Their anxiety was so great, their mouth just completely was sealed. And then at that point, I realized, you know what, I've got to build rapport with the kid first. So I gave him a tour of my whole basement, and then I brought him back, and he still wouldn't open up his mouth. So then I thought to myself, and I felt that this was really Hashem putting it in my mind, maybe reading a whole pasuk was too much for him. And so what I ended up doing is I discovered, and it only took minutes, I discovered that if I were to ask him to read 1-syllable words, ki, gum, gun, of, by is 2 syllables, li, it was very easy for him, no mistakes. When it came to 2 syllables, slight pause. 3 syllables, 4 syllables, shut down. Now I realize his anxiety is based on, for years, he's not being able to read, and when he gets to a 2 or 3 syllable word, he shuts down. Every pasuk has at least 1 or 2 words that has 3 or 4 syllables. So then of course he's going to shut down. He doesn't want to even start the pasuk. So there's lots. I agree, but this will definitely help. And the way the teacher is very patient and very respectful, and tells the child up front, you're in control over here. If you never want to come again, you never have to. Those are ways to help reduce the anxiety that the child will have. The anxiety is purely based on, I'm a failure, I can't, I hate reading, I've got no experience of being successful, and all I'm going to do is humiliate myself, and you're going to realize how stupid I am. Yes, sir?
Is this whole reading problem, is this a modern-day phenomenon? I mean, I don't...
Okay. You don't want me to go there.
What's that?
If you do not want me to go there, if you want me to go there, read a book by Dr. B. Stein, The ADD-ADHD Fiasco. ADD-ADHD Fiasco.
Who handles that?
Sorry? He explains that there's an unwritten contract between the pharmaceutical companies and educational institutions to identify the only population that will never be able to advocate or defend themselves, children.